There are few things in life quite like finishing a Final Fantasy game. It is a remarkable challenge to tell stories that are as far-reaching and vast as these and wrap them up in a satisfying way, but this franchise tends to nail the landing almost every single time. So let's celebrate them. My name is Drew Kreisman, I am one half of the Final Fantasy Weekly podcast, and these are my picks for the top 10 endings in the Final Fantasy multiverse. Note, I'm going to do my best to be as spoiler-free as possible, but we are talking about the ends of these stories, so if you're super sensitive to spoilers, you might want to skip entries for the games you haven't played or come back to this list later on. Alright, number 10. Final Fantasy Tactics. This might be the toughest one to explain without just stating what happens, and I couldn't bear to ruin the end of this game for anyone. Suffice it to say that for a story that bears a lot of similarities to Game of Thrones, since both were based on the same real-life wars, Final Fantasy Tactics does a much better job of concluding its tale. Holding back on a brilliant subversion right until the very final seconds, it is one of the boldest and most provocative endings in the series, managing to surprise most of us while somehow still feeling like it was inevitable. Number 9. Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VI has the kind of ending that we all secretly really do want, but it can be easy to roll your eyes at if it's done inartfully. Really just a step and a half away from putting text on the screen like a schmaltzy 80s movie letting us know what happened to everybody after high school, VI gracefully accomplishes this character coda, mostly through visuals and music and a few short lines of dialogue. Without overdoing it, we get a sense of closure for each friend we searched for along the way, and a satisfying wrap-up to the story of the Returners versus the Empire. Number 8. Chrono Trigger. I guess this is technically cheating because Chrono Trigger has, a whole bunch of endings. Some are hilarious, some are silly, some are thoughtful, but the main conclusion to this story, where Chrono and friends must say goodbye and return to their own eras, is tough to capture in words. A melancholy persists through the joy of having saved the day, the world, the timeline even. We are left with a great deal to ponder and very few answers about the nature of our world and the people in it. Number 7. Final Fantasy XIII. I'm not going to debate or relitigate the quality of Final Fantasy XIII at this time. I am simply going to state without equivocation that its ending is a certified banger. I'm not sure I could tell you exactly what happens here, though again I'm trying to avoid getting too deep into the details, but I can say that the imagery contained in this conclusion is stupendous and memorable. Sacrifices are made and others are undone as we say goodbye to some and are reunited with others. Good stuff. Number 6. Final Fantasy VIII. Speaking of not being 100% sure what, happens here, the ending of Final Fantasy VIII is a fever dream mixed with an acid trip, crossed with a misremembered hallucination. It is a surrealist examination of some of the more challenging philosophical concepts in the series, and a brilliant final piece of one of the strangest silent movie-esque experiences in gaming. That's the first half anyway. The second features a far more recognizable scene of characters completing their arcs and finding some closure after the conclusion of near world-shattering events. Plus, there are hot dogs. And the final few moments, as almost always, are just perfection. Number 5. Kingdom Hearts 2. Speaking of surrealist art in motion, the entire final few hours of Kingdom Hearts 2 are nothing short of genius. After one of the greatest final boss battles in gaming history, Sora and friends wrap up one chapter while setting the stage for an enormous universe of ever-deepening lore. I specifically resonate with the emotional climax embodied by the Roxas character. The lessons learned by Sora and friends may be, in some ways, simple, but that doesn't make them any less profound. Number 4. Final Fantasy XV. Can I just say the campfire scene and just hand out some Kleenex and keep moving on? Honestly, though, there is much more to the excellence in the conclusion of 15 beyond that one scene, though that one scene is among the greatest in franchise history. The best trick that this conclusion pulls off, though, is how expertly it contrasts the huge, world-shaping, history-spanning events with the deeply personal individual moments between friends. It also scores off the charts in the wow category, and make sure you stick around through the credits for one of the most beautiful and clever audio-visual moments in all of Final Fantasy. Number 3, Final Fantasy IX. If the emotions weren't overflowing yet, they probably are now. How do you even begin to encapsulate the pure magic of the final act of this glorious fairy tale? Just know that I, and millions like me, cannot watch this without crying tears of sadness and joy in equal measure. The end of Final Fantasy IX is so full of charm and love of all varieties that it will warm your heart, soothe your soul, and sing you to sleep. It is truly, truly special. Number 2, Final Fantasy VII. All of them. I had to cheat, and I'm sorry. I tried to separate them, but I couldn't leave any out and didn't want 7 to dominate this list. The original ending is arguably the most bold of the series, posing far more questions than it answers, leading to a series of debates that rage to this day. It's one of the best examples in gaming, or maybe any modern fantasy and sci-fi, of ending on a WTF note without the audience feeling cheated. Crisis Core does nearly the impossible of landing exactly where we know it is going and still giving us an extremely intense emotional response to our arrival at the big moment. And if that wasn't enough, Remake outdoes them all by leaving everyone from total newbies and longtime series veterans with their mouths agape, desperate to ponder and theorize about what comes next. There are few things in life quite as uniquely bittersweet as the end of any chapter in the Final Fantasy VII story. And number 1, Final Fantasy X. Words cannot do this ending justice. It is so completely perfect that I almost can't stand it. You can find hours of footage on YouTube of streamers finishing this game in a pool of their own tears. The end of Final Fantasy X feels hauntingly inevitable. Far deeper than your typical tragedy, its melancholy speaks to the very heart of our existence and need for companionship. What it means to love and be loved, what it means to be. It has, in my opinion, the most beautiful final line of dialogue in the franchise and carries one of the most profound messages I have experienced in a piece of art in my lifetime. There may not be any ending of any story that I can think of that tops my experience with this piece of artistry and philosophy in motion. Thank you for watching and listening. And as always, a huge shout out to our Patreon subscribers. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month and get all kinds of Final Fantasy content, including over 80 in-depth podcasts at patreon.com/ffweekly. If you're interested in other nerdy talk like Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, MCU, DCEU, and more, check out patreon.com/DC Productions. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below to our channel and to all the contributors who help make it possible.